Hey guys, Marcus Melnick here with Firearm Mentor. Hope you're enjoying my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. These little things are free to you and really help the channel. I appreciate your support. Enjoy. Thank you.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host. And wow, has it been an amazing, incredible week with lots of things happening. Not only do we have a new president of the United States, we also had the SHOT Show, and it's two different topics. I'm going to cover as much as I possibly can in the next two half-an-hour segments. So, President Trump was elected. Vice President Vance was sworn in as well. And wow, a flurry of executive orders, and we're going to talk about a few of them. I'm really concerned that this is going to throw the United States into a frenzy. While we might be stronger internationally, I think we're weaker internally. And let me tell you what I mean. First of all, we have big changes for the border. And I personally support this, but there is a bill to make immigration detentions and deportations easier. It gained final approval in Congress. It's called the Laken-Riley Act, and it only needs President Trump's signature, and it's on top of the sweeping executive actions Trump has already issued this week. And the orders cover a lot of ground. They suspend the refugee program and stop the entrance of migrants fleeing dictatorships. You can tell that this article that I'm going over was written from a liberal point of view because it's talking about dictatorships. It's actually from NPR. Trump also wants to end birthright citizenship. I don't think he can do that because it is in the Constitution, and there's a case that we'll talk about in a little bit. He also aims to expand the power and reach of immigration authorities. Some of these moves are already being challenged in court. So how could actions that are upheld reshape the immigration landscape in the United States? Well, this crackdown is a centerpiece of Trump's executive actions, and we've all followed it closely. And there's a large number of things that happen, but this sticks out. It's interesting because it's so wide-ranging and it aims to create a new dynamic on immigration enforcement. And the executive order says, quote, it suspends the physical entry of aliens engaged in an invasion of the United States through the southern border, end quote. And Trump's declaration of a national emergency at the south border means he'll likely have access to a lot more money and resources for border security. That's why he declared it an emergency. Today, earlier this week, I should say, the Pentagon indicated that it's going to send an additional 1,500 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. And it's unknown how they're going to be deployed, but President Biden deployed troops to the southern border as well, and so did Trump during his first term. But the scale of Trump's actions is a little bit different. So it's very interesting. There is a case going on right now, actually it's already decided, where a federal judge in Seattle blocked temporarily the president's attempt to rescind birthright citizenship. The idea is spelled out in the Constitution that every person born in the United States is an American citizen. And it's in the Constitution. Trump really can't do anything about it. Any president, forget the name. Senior U.S. District Judge John Kogenauer on Thursday was blistering in his criticism of Trump's action, and he granted a temporary restraining order that blocks Trump's executive order from taking effect nationwide. The judge said, I've been on the bench for over 4 decades, and I can't remember another case where the question presented is as clear as this one is. This is a blatantly unconstitutional order. And the judge was an appointee of Ronald Reagan, so he's been on the bench a long time. There are other times in world history where we look back and people of goodwill can say, where were the judges? Where were the lawyers? So very interesting. It's already blocked. on federal court, I'm sure it's going to be a legal battle ensuing. I've also heard in the news and on the radio and articles that there are illegal immigrants who are now sleeping in their garages for fear that ICE is going to knock on their door. This is kind of ridiculous because now you're putting people, at least in the Chicago area, in this atrociously cold, assuming the garages aren't heated, and most garages are not heated. And it's really putting people in danger. Forget about their status as an immigrant. There are people all around that are really, really scared. Let me tell you what I mean. First of all, there are memes and signs that are circulating on the internet, particularly in social media, that says turn in people to ICE who are illegal aliens or illegal immigrants. I absolutely hate that. Why do I hate that? Because I'm Jewish. Guess what the Nazis did? And wow, I hate to compare it to Nazi Germany, but there's a really negative term that some Jewish people call other Jewish people, and it's called I might mispronounce it, kopa or kopa. These are the Jews that turned in other Jews to the Nazis to gain favor. Ridiculous. I am minding my business. I don't even know any illegal immigrants, but I really fear that this is going to result in some absolute ridiculous, unnecessary violence. The other thing that I want to point out is that churches and schools are no longer off limits to ICE agents who are rounding up undocumented migrants. The Trump administration said that churches and schools are no longer off limits to the feds. Homeland Security issues say that the Biden-era policy made it easier for migrants with criminal records to hide from law enforcement, but critics say the change will make it harder for many migrant families to worship and send their kids to school. In fact, in Elgin, it's reported that there are students who aren't going to school for fear that they will be deported. That's the problem. ICE agents can wait and stalk outside of a school. Mom or dad walks to school, drops off the kid, and then the feds jump on them. And holy cow, the deportations have already started with military planes. Now, the deportations that have started, I'm actually okay with because they are of people who have committed crimes. And I don't mean stealing a pack of gum from the Jewel. I mean violent crimes, rape, murder, assault, battery, aggravated battery, firearm charges. But the problem is now we have children in the United States, and this is going to set back education, who are afraid to go to school. And even the ones that go to school are fearful because they can't learn when they are scared. It is an absolute travesty. Now, I'm A-okay with deporting people who are undocumented or illegal if they're in the criminal justice system, they've committed crimes. Send them back. I get it. Cool. I also am A-okay with locking down the borders and giving people who want to come into the country a legal way to do so instead of an illegal way to do so. And the executive order is a little, I think it might be overreaching. I'm not sure. Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, who is just a real tough guy. And I mean that not sarcastically. The guy's tough. He is starting in Chicago, and his plan to start in Chicago is being reconsidered. Immigrant rights activists have been working to educate local migrants about their gun rights, about their legal, I'm talking about gun rights. That was a mistake. About their legal rights if they are detained or questioned by ICE individuals. Chicago and Illinois law prevents local law enforcement from asking about a person's immigration status, detaining them because they lack status, and most notably, largely bars officers from cooperating with federal agents. There's an exception of ICE agents who are looking for individuals with federal criminal warrants. I'm okay with that. But Chicago's mayor, Brandon Johnson, told NPR that it's his job to protect residents, whether they're documented or undocumented, whether they're seeking asylum or they're just seeking a good-paying job. He also went on to say we're going to fight and stand up for working people. That's what Chicago is known for. Actually, it's known for crime and corruption, but don't tell anyone I told you that. We're going to continue to do that regardless of who's in the White House. Now, Johnson's sticking to his guns, so to speak, haha, pun intended, but the reality is you're setting up local governments against the federal government, and it's kind of what happened in the mid 1800s with the Civil War. And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of civil unrest. I am afraid, yeah, big tough Marcus. I'm afraid of civil unrest. I'm afraid for my son who's out of state in the deep South. I'm afraid for him. Now, nothing's probably going to happen, but hey, fear is not rational. So there's a lot of people around here who are absolutely afraid. And I have heard that ICE agents are going to schools from a very good and reliable source, which I cannot reveal. So yes, I am afraid that there's some nice people that are going to have some issues when with deportation. Now, there's some positives to this. First of all, in his executive order, Trump has designated drug cartels as terrorists. What does that mean? Well, the declaration that Mexican drug cartels are terrorist groups is part of what he calls a revolution of common sense, along with tightening the U.S. border. And Trump signed another executive order asserting the cartel's activities threaten the security of the United States. All illegal traffic across the southern border is controlled by crime groups. In certain portions of Mexico, they function as quasi-governmental agencies. Previous American presidents have considered labeling the cartels as terrorist groups, but they always back down in the face of stiff Mexican opposition. So why is Mexico so opposed to this? Well, some background on the idea of cartels as terrorists. 1996 law allowed the State Department to create a list of foreign terrorist organizations, also called FTOs, and punish those on it with special sanctions. Some of the best-known groups were Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, and Hamas. President Obama was among those who thought about adding Mexican drug gangs to the terrorism list. Instead, he sent them guns. Now, I don't know that as a fact. That's just me being sarcastic. While the narcos might not fit the traditional terrorist profile, they're not driven by a political agenda like Osama bin Laden, but they've used similar tactics such as car bombings and beheadings. In the past few years, as tens of thousands of Americans died from fentanyl smuggled over the border, the idea of branding traffickers as terrorists gained traction. 21 Republican attorneys general asked President Joe Biden to add Mexican cartels to the terrorist list in 2023. Trump's new border czar said that Mexican crime groups have killed more Americans than every terrorist organization in the world, and that Trump was committed to calling them terrorist organizations and using the full might of the United States Special Operations to take them out. The new order really doesn't specify which Mexican groups would be added to the list, but it does order the Secretary of State to come up with the names and also to consider criminal gangs from other countries, such as MS-13 from El Salvador and the Tren de Aragua from Venezuela. The United States already has laws against the cartels, so what's going to change? Well, there's an aggressive measure known as the Kingpin Act to target drug traffickers. Suspects on the list and their businesses and operatives are barred from using U.S. financial system or making deals with American citizens. A terrorism designation expands the government's ability to prosecute people who supply services or, quote, material support, end quote, to these groups. The new listing would also expand the authority to collect, quote, military action intelligence on the cartels, according to an analysis from the Mexico Institute of the Wilson Center. I have no idea who that is. Why does Mexico oppose labeling cartels as terrorist groups? Well, no country wants to be seen as a home to a terrorist group. Mexico does have a lot at stake. Foreign visitors bring in billions of dollars each year, from tourists sunning on the beaches to executives investing in car factories. And the Mexican authorities worry that the terrorist label could affect everything, from insurance rates to the number of exchange students attending Mexican universities. But there's a bigger geopolitical concern. The states that harbor terrorists around the world, whether Afghanistan or the Philippines or Mali or Colombia, do so because there are large swaths of ungoverned territory. Mexico is consistently pushing back against the idea that its whole is not governed by Mexican authorities. Mexico is also nervous that a terrorist designation could raise the likelihood of unilateral U.S. military actions. In 2020, Trump floated the idea of a missile attack on Mexican drug labs, according to former Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper, but he was talked out of it. Asked Monday night whether he would indeed send the special forces to confront the cartels, Trump said, "Could happen. Stranger things have happened." So why the terrorist label could wind up hitting Americans? Well, it can be difficult in Mexico to identify who is tied to drug gangs. The traffickers wield wide influence, contributing to political campaigns and interacting with legitimate firms. Crime groups charge protection fees to Americans, from tiny tortilla shops to giant gold mines and the avocado farms that Americans send the key ingredient to their guac. Business owners who pay up may suddenly find themselves in the crosshairs of anti-terrorism investigations, and things could go awry for the American partners. Americans, too, share intimate ties to the cartels. The majority of those arrested carrying fentanyl across the border are, in fact, U.S. citizens. Most guns used by traffickers are acquired from Americans. In theory, U.S. gun dealers could be charged with aiding terrorists under this new measure. The Justice Department would have to figure out exactly whom to pursue. Assembling such cases is very complex and time-consuming, and yet has proven to impact the number of prosecutions substantially. So what's Mexico's reaction? Well, any unilateral U.S. military action could destroy the relationship between Mexico, which is America's #1 trade partner. The country still has keen memories of U.S. invasions and land disputes in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico's president, said Tuesday that Mexico will cooperate with its neighbor on fighting drug trafficking, but would never agree to U.S. military raids. They can act in their own territory according to their regulations and their constitution, she told their daily news conference. What we insist on is defense of our sovereignty and our independence. A former Mexican ambassador to Washington said that the problem with adding cartels to the terrorism list was the focus on military solutions to the drug crisis. "You're playing whack-a-mole," he said, noting that the cartels simply reconfigure after kingpins are detained or killed. "What's needed is a more sophisticated strategy," he said, including curbing U.S. demand for drugs and choking off cartels' money. By relying on anti-terrorism tools, he said, you're missing important components of the holistic mix of policies you have to put in place to fight organized crime. Why can't we just issue them pagers? That was a pause for effect there. It's kind of a joke. Speaking of terrorists and international policies, there's an interesting report in the news. The Israeli hostages released as part of the recent ceasefire with Hamas have claimed they were held at a UN camp in Gaza. Romy Gonan, Emily Damari, and Doron Steinbrecher, who were released from Hamas custody last week today, reported that they have been held in a UN refugee camp at some point during their captivity, according to Israel's Channel 13. We don't have details as to what camps they were held in, when, or for how long, but this revelation is the latest blow to the position of UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, which has faced attacks against its credibility throughout the war in Gaza. The Washington Examiner reached out to them, and they operate 8 refugee camps in the Gaza Strip, established in 1948 and 1949 after the Israeli War of Independence, and most aren't recognizable as, quote, camps in the traditional sense, having developed over time into urban establishments. Several have populations numbering over 100,000 people. The majority of Gazans are registered as refugees. The UN clarifies in its website that it doesn't administer or police the camps, leaving those matters to governing Hamas authorities, but it does employ 13,000 staff, over 300 installations to provide education, medical attention, and other humanitarian aid to locals. Israel has accused some UN staff members of being members of Hamas alleging last year that 19 staffers were members of the militant group. The agency fired 9 staffers after finding links with Hamas, though they found insufficient evidence in 10 other cases. The 3 hostages that were released were held in captivity for 471 days, and the current ceasefire aims to release all remaining hostages in the upcoming weeks. Now, a lot of people have seen on the internet, on social media, I don't remember which one it was, but her two middle fingers, her ring finger and her middle finger, were cut off and fused together. Now, that's just cruel. And it's bandaged, and she's holding up her pinky, her index, and her thumb. And I grew up in the deaf community partially, not like Joe Biden grew up in all these communities. I mean, I actually learned sign language and deaf culture as a child. And that symbol in American Sign Language means I love you. And I think that's just poetic, that photo. People are getting tattoos of it. I love how a horrible, horrible situation has been morphed into an absolutely wonderful sign and signal. Of course, we want everyone who is an innocent person, whether they are a hostage from Hamas, whether they are an illegal alien who is just a good person, we never wish anyone harm. And it's very interesting. I hear people say, oh, the shooter, the assassin shouldn't have missed, or they were a bad... come on, you really wish someone dead? I don't wish anyone dead. There are first images, though, of the ICE mass deportation efforts that show arrests of MS-13 gang members and murder suspects. I think that's a good thing. I don't know. You guys might have a different opinion, and that is absolutely cool. But let me go into some safety things, because that's what the show is all about. Hang on for one message.
I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRESS2logic.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show.
Now, we're all about personal safety, and there are some things I hear people give me anecdotes all the time. One of my coworkers explained to me that someone had a cousin, and the dad had a gun laying around, and the cousin picked it up to move it and accidentally shot his best friend in the leg, and the friend didn't make it. This happened in Ohio, although I don't have any details. The shooter obviously was accidental, is having a hard time, and he was taken to the police department. So please, please, even if you don't have children at home, lock up your guns. Oh, but I can't get to it in case there's an emergency. They have quick release safes. If you need a recommendation on a specific type of safe, please reach out to me via my electronic business card, which is my name, Marcus Melnick. That is Marcus Melnick, MELNICK.com. I'm happy to give you a link to something that you could purchase, but please, please, please be careful with your firearms. As a matter of fact, I got a message from another person who I know who said, I need your advice. I effed up. Now he said something else, but I'm shortening it for family stuff. I went to visit someone in another state, and on the way down, we stopped for the night. I placed my 9mm in a drawer, and we went to dinner because I'm always nervous about someone rifling through my luggage when we're gone. Needless to say, I forgot it. My thoughts are to report it missing when I get home. The gun is, quote, registered in my wife's name, and we don't have any information on it here. So again, careful, careful, careful. That is just as important as gold jewelry, as your wallet, as your cell phone. Even more important than that, I would even say that. So please, please keep your stuff secure. The advice that I told them was to call the hotel first and explain if it was turned in to the hotel, found it was probably turned into the police, which is the next step. And at least he can start getting a lead. Guns are not registered. Now, we did have a registration thing for specific firearms. It was short-lived, but just because you buy a firearm does not mean it is registered with the government. That record stays with the gun dealer. If the gun dealer closes or goes out of business, the records are then sent to an ATF warehouse, which is absolutely enormous, very difficult to find a specific individual record. So guns are not registered in someone's name. And I'm talking about specifically Illinois, because that's what I'm familiar with. I'm not really sure about the other types of states. Would you like to learn more about firearm safety? Well, it just so happens we have a concealed carry class next weekend, February 1st and 2nd, in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. You can find out more information. You can enroll in the class if you go to www.firearmmentor.com/classes. And before we end this segment, I just want to tell everyone that I'm constantly reviewing new products and services, including the insurance plans. And I'm in the middle of reviewing a very new insurance plan, although I am mid-review, so I don't want to reveal anything at the moment. But some plans are getting very much improved because of various cases that happen, and I'm very encouraged by this. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.